Folks, it's your friendly Spirit Wolf. I hope the lighting outside is not affecting the camera, but I'm going to show you what we got and show you the engine that I want to mess with. Okay, so originally I have a video that I have not posted up yet as I'm doing this one. Don't know when it is. I'm hoping it comes up before this. That's what I want to do because it's basically the synopsis. But to overview in this video again, I went to a sale. They were selling the guy's stuff. You'll know more about it in the other video. And I originally just got this first and then this. $20 for the pair. But today I just went back and I ended up looking again one final time. And I got one more item to come. You will see that when it comes. And I picked up this engine for $1. And the other item because the guy just wanted to get rid of this stuff. So for $1 you couldn't go wrong. I am going to try to get this running. I'm hoping that this will work with this Bollens here, and I could possibly get it to go into this tractor and run, even though I'll show you here. It's wonder what horse it is. I don't know if you can see that. It is a 7-horse Kohler, the cast iron line. And most likely this came out of a rototiller. That's what I'm going to say. And this tractor is pretty heavy duty. But I would think this engine, even though being a 7-horse is pretty heavy built, is going to, I could say possibly push that, but we'll see. So for today's video, let's get into it and let's see what we need to get this little bugger going. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go get my spark plugs, or wrenches I mean, and because I'm sure from sitting we might need to clean the points. So you will get set right here and I will be back momentarily. Hoping that you can see that, of course. I think you can just barely see it, but we'll prop you somewhere else. Lately it has been really cold, YouTube folks, very cold up where I am, but it's still not snowing, so that's a plus. So I thought I'd come out here because you might not see me much in the winter unless I can get my heat up this winter out in my shop doing that, but I'm going to try my best to do videos that I can do. But with this colder weather coming, you know, as far as the tractors and such, don't be holding your hopes too much on those because there's not much for the cold in recent years. So small. It's a matter of finding that right one that's going to go on there. Either too big or too small. One of the two. But we'll get one. That's for certain. As far as the history of this engine, not much is known about it. The guy thinks that his father-in-law was this was his estate, was most likely using this, or even his father-in-law's grandfather, or I mean not grandfather but father, were using this as a way to hoist little aluminum boats onto a trailer, and that's why this was set up. But as you can, I don't know if you can see that. I'll bring you down to it. So I don't know if you can see that. But if you look at the back, if they had any winch set up, it was taken off of it years ago because there's just no pulley there. I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of hard for me with this sunlight, but we're working with it. Give you the best view of what I'm doing. Propping you up on this here roto hoe. So, something. I'm going to pull the spark plug, and I'm going to probably bring you over here. If you can see that, pretty sure you can, that's pretty black spark plug on the tip. So, not surprised, it's been sitting out in the weather, so we don't know, but it's free, so that's the bonus. It is turning, so that's good. But we just don't know anything else about it at this point. So, yet to be determined. I'm almost 100% sure that it wouldn't hurt to replace the spark plug, but it's probably going to need coarse carb clean, but definitely points and condenser work, because this one is old enough to have points. This one's probably from the 60s. I would guesstimate late 60s, early 70s at least. This is a honker bugger, and it's a Kohler, as I thought it was, because when I looked at it further, I then thought, well, maybe it was actually a Tecumseh, but looking at the tag, you can see it's a Kohler, just as I thought. Now, the fun part will be determining if this thing's got any spark in it, and that should be, if I can get spark to come out of it, I will show you guys on the camera as best I can. But so far I'm not seeing any spark coming from this. So, yet to be determined. It could be just where I'm setting the spark plug. I may have to clean this spark plug and just try again with a wire brush. Clean it, I mean, that's a hit or miss. And no spark. So we've determined there's no spark, and I will, whoops, sorry about the finger, guys. I will bring you over here and show you that. I don't know if you can see it too. Probably won't see it too well. I'm hoping you do, but I don't know if you can see that. There is no spark out of that. As I hunched, because it has been sitting outside. Typical things. It does. As you can see, this one has the points and condenser out here. Somebody put a later model condenser, or a replacement condenser on there, I think. Because I'm pretty sure the original one is supposed to be in here. And so why they have it out here, I don't know. But I could be wrong about that. Maybe it is the way it's designed. Usually these are enclosed. But this one is, if that's the case, which I'm hunching it, it could be This is a very crude design. Anyways, but cleaning these points will get spark back in this easily enough. And I know for a fact that carburetor is going to be needed to go through. So what we'll do is we'll pull this filter up. I'm kind of just one-handing it because I don't really have a tripod. And of course, as you know, I'm on my phone instead of a regular camera, which would be great, but funds don't have it for a camera. And surprisingly in here, it's relatively clean. This filter has got a little bit of stuff on there, but it looks like it's been maintained at one point. Well, again, like I said, you can tell it's been outside because the rusty linkages. Sorry. And just having trouble with my words lately a little bit. But yeah, you can tell the rusty linkages is indicative of a sign that's been sitting out. I am going to set you guys up on the Rotoho again, hoping you can kind of see it. I'll spin it your way. I want to get a pair of pliers for the tank, and I also want to get a screwdriver / 7/16 wrench for the carb, because I almost guarantee that carburetor is going to need to be cleaned out. And luckily I have bought some more carbon choke cleaner recently. The fact it's been sitting is telling me that it's going to need to. I could be wrong about that, but I'm almost 100% sure. It's been sitting outside and the guy had not run it in forever, probably. So for now, we'll just loosely put the spark plug back in there. And I will also clean up the points, which is a very straightforward thing, very easy to do. Anyone can really do this kind of work. It's when you start to get into the more building of these that they can get a little more complex. Like I said, this roto, well, you'll hear more about this rotoette in the next video, but now you've seen it. I will do a further in-depth video on it, and it's like I said in the last video that talks about it, is if I can't get it on C's because the engine is locked up and I absolutely can't get it running, I'm not going to put too much into it because of the hobby prices on parts for these are just not worth it anymore, like they used to be, unless it's something you really want to see. And this is a piece that, from what I showed you of the Rotoette is what it's called. It's basically a Rotoho. It is not real practical for a big time garden anymore, versus as it was back in the days when you had to work with what you had. Nowadays, because there's bigger rototillers, not that they didn't have them back then, but because there's bigger rototillers now, and less of these little ones, it's more convenient for people nowadays, the big one, and that's why I'm fixing the big one, because you get a better cut, less time, more time in your day, especially if you own a farm. So keep that in mind, but I'll be right back with you folks. Okay, I am back, YouTube folks, and I am going to work on getting this thing off. So, there's 2 screws in the front plate on these that hold the filter housing on, and I'll show them to you when I get them off. You can either take that off once you get the carb off or before. I just like to do it before because it's easier when the carb is sitting on the machine. And you'll notice that I always keep the spark plug wire off when I'm servicing stuff, just because it's a force of habit, and I highly recommend you doing that because there are dangers of the engine starting and moving parts. Currently not sure how, if at all, frozen up the linkages are. And then you have this gasket here too, which I'll show you. So you have this gasket right here. I don't know if you can see that gasket. And then you also have the 2 screws. And that gasket goes behind those screws. Kinda. There you go. Anyways, that gasket goes behind those screws. And that's what keeps a seal here. This gasket's in pretty rough shape, but we're going to try to reuse it because even though they're cheap enough and you could probably make one, I just don't feel like replacing it if I don't have to. If I can get by with it because it's only mating to the carb. As long as it isn't full on leaking, you should be fine. And you can reuse those. A lot of people like to replace them. But it's totally up to preference. I always say, it's totally, like I said, it's totally preference. If you want to replace it, go ahead. If you want to save a little money, and just do on the fly. So I can tell that this has been in here, or been worked on before, I mean to say, because of the fact that the carb bolts seem to be coming off fairly easily. So that's a bonus. That means that whoever had this, the guy that had this before, has worked on it and serviced it in the past. Because normally when you find these, especially in the weather, and you can't guarantee their condition, oftentimes this stuff is frozen up. So the fact that it's been sitting outside but those didn't freeze up tells me that it has been serviced in the past, which is a good sign. Always like that. Now I've loosened those up, I think I can get the screwdrivers on them finally. The screwdriver on them finally, I should say. Which makes it a lot easier with these. A lot of guys just sit there, or girls that service these, sit there and they use the, they like to use the wrench. And that's all fine and dandy. I mean, you can risk tripping it. It's good to use the wrench for the beginning, but I like using the screwdriver after, because it just makes the job so much easier taking these off. Especially once you've gotten them loosened. And then you can just screw them back on after and then tighten them up with a wrench again to make sure they're snug enough to where they won't come off. But I don't think you have to worry too much about stuff like this. Because after all, you're just... This is just anything. And most likely this bowl under here, the nut, I'll show you, it is probably going to be a 1/2 inch thread. So, I forget if the O stands for open. And we have not looked in this tank because the thing is stuck on there. Actually, I just got it free. I believe there's some fuel left in there. But, you see the inside of this cap looks a little worse for wear. But that's no sign that the tank is bad. We won't know until we actually drain the fuel. Sounds like this fuel isn't all that bad, which means this could have been ran recently, but you can't guarantee that. I mean, compared to some of the fuel that I've smelt in these, and let me tell you, I've smelt some fuel in this stuff before. This relatively smells like it's still there, but how long ago was this machine running? And from what I could tell is the spark went out on it, so maybe that's why it was put up there. Who knows? Just didn't use it enough and it sat. Could have been ran last year with the smell of that fuel, which wasn't all that bad as I thought it would be. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody out there that would beg to differ with me on the smell of that fuel, but we're going to pour it out anyways, and we're going to see what the fuel looks like. So I'm going to go grab quickly a pair of pliers and a gas can, because I want to drain this thing. Sorry, YouTube folks, for my going back and forth. I'm usually on the ball about this kind of thing. On these things, but I've just been doing what trying to get been busy, so I should have thought to coordinate the getting all the tools I would need with this video, but I didn't, and that's my fault, and I'm sorry about that, but just bear with me. A lot's been on my mind lately, so that's kind of why there's that reason. But we're gonna roll this off, and hopefully this line comes off easily enough. We won't know. Gotta love these. I don't know if you can see them. A little. Instead of the screw on, they're, for those of you who are familiar with them, they're the ones you have to crimp with the pliers to expand them, the fuel clamps. I do not like those ones whatsoever. That's just my personal opinion. I mean, I do give them, they hold a better, tighter seal sometimes, I think. That is a plus to them, but they're just a pain in the butt to take off. versus the on-screw type. You can just unscrew it and get it, relatively easily. That's the only downside of those. That's not my favorite thing in the world. Well, I'll say that. This fuel line does not want to come off. I don't really feel like breaking it. Normally I don't do this, but I'm going to try to take out this here 7/16 nut that holds the, that's like a fuel barb. It is stuck in there. Wondering if I can take it from here instead. I don't normally do that either, taking it from the fuel shutoff. That's coming out a little bit easier. So, fuel shutoff has got some crud in it, or it did have some crud in it, I should say. So let's get a view of our fuel. Hard to tell, but it's definitely yellow. That is for certain. It might be a little hard to see from the, but it's yellow. It's an ultra yellow. So now we're gonna get into our bowl, our fuel bowl, our little 1/2-inch nut. Our lovely 1/2-inch nut, which kind of figures it would be a little frozen after all. How many years this has probably been seized on there. Looks like the carburetor at one point took a little bit of a whammo. I don't know if you can see that. Not a big deal, but hopefully that didn't puncture a hole in it. That would be just lovely. Such is life. As long as it didn't. Oh yeah. Look at that, YouTube folks. Some glorified goodness. And wait till you see what, as I hunched, would be as our little bowl. So that's going to take some cleaning. That right there is the grit from this engine not running and sitting, and then the fuel just, so probably a year this has been sitting, and a year or two, probably 2 years this has been sitting. I'm going to say 2 years this had sit, because the fuel is yellow and you can tell it's kind of bad, but it not to the point where all the ethanol or alcohol of the fuel has purged out of it. So I'm going to say that's been sitting for a year or two. Okay, so I did grab it already, YouTube folks, but I just didn't get a rag. So, this is the state of our lovely carburetor. Like I said, I figured this much because of how long it had probably been sitting out. So, you got one of these rags. I don't normally do this by the machine. I normally do it on the bench. But for now, I'm doing it by the machine just because this gasket is really crimpled and possibly homemade. This should be intriguing. I don't have an ultrasonic cleaner or for this carburetor, nor do I really want to put it through one, because even if I did, I'll risk that ruining that gasket, and I kind of don't want to. Because you see, the problem with these older Kohlers, much as I love them, sometimes they can be hard to get parts for, and I don't really want to search the internet for a gasket if I can help it. This gasket's pretty worn looking, but for what it is and what I'm doing with it, I'm just going to try to make it work. Because like I said, I don't really want to put a whole ton of money into this if I can help it. Down the road, I probably will get a new gasket for it, maybe, if I end up keeping this. But just to sake of getting it running, I'm just going to let it ride for now. Because I don't really see where it's that bad that I'm overly worried. I don't know if you can see that, but I don't feel like getting up to stand up. But the choke plate is gotten bent over the years a little. That's not going to affect it too much, but that's not the best thing for them. But the carburetor cleaned it up okay. It's not perfect by any means, but I think we might be able to get this bugger running. On an ideal perfect environment, I would pull all these out and find the adjustments, but I really don't feel like screwing around with the adjustments for this carb, nor do I feel like trying to get this out. So I'm just going to try to clean up as much of the carb as I can. Because even though it had a little bit of soot in it, it's really not that. It's really not that bad. I've seen worse for what I'm dealing with in this instant. I've seen a lot worse. Like I said, that gasket is pretty pungy. That's pretty much, I don't know if you can see that. That's right. That's what weather does to stuff like this. It just destroys it. It's typical. And then you got this lovely weathered corrosion on it. Typical of this. When you leave stuff outside, this is what happens. I can't stress this enough. Don't leave your stuff outside. You will regret it. I mean, I guess if you don't really care that much about the equipment you have, but if you care enough about it, you don't leave it outside. See, this guy was in the business of repairing this stuff as well and selling it. But he just had leftover stock. And so that's why I figured he kept a lot of this outside, is because he didn't necessarily have the space for it. In his buildings. I'm going to honestly say where I see things is this gentleman's place, and this is just my opinion, you know, nothing against the guy, you know, rest his soul, you know, it was sad. He had a little outbuilding where there was just piles of wood in there. And to me, I would have cleaned that out to make space for the mowers, because some of that wood really didn't serve anything in particular. But I'm sure he had a purpose for it. At least from how I view it. But, you know, he probably had a purpose for it. So, you know, that's totally his prerogative. But I would have cleaned that out and stuck a lot of this older stuff in there instead of left it out in the yard. I made that like my little mower storage area. Because there's two crop outbuildings, and he had an old boat in there and some other stuff, and I would have cleaned that out and made that my little like area. You just never know. See, this is, I don't know if you can see it, it's kind of rusty on both ends. Yeah, it's definitely rusty. I could probably take it to a wire wheel, but I think there's just the purpose of seeing if this thing will even run. I'm just going to let it go. Now, we may not get this running in this video. Not that I don't hold high hopes. I just don't, I guess what I'm going to say is I don't know for sure. That's how I want to leave that. Because you never know with this stuff. Anything's possible. I mean, this thing being as old as it is, it's not really mounted to anything either. So, just have to be careful where we hold it. I may or may not attempt to run this in this video, because I don't really have it bolted in anywhere. I think the shaft is a slight bit smaller than that, but I'm yet to see if it will work in there. Like I said, being as old as this is, you just never know, do you? But our linkages seem to be freed up. If I could get this to work, I may entertain refurbishing this engine and repainting it with a fresh coat of red. I would not match it as the same color that tractor. I would paint it red. That is if I end up keeping that tractor and restoring it. I would repaint this, but like I said, it would not be, it would go back to the same red, because if you know, like I do, for anyone who's familiar with painting stuff, you will know that red bleeds through. Not that I wouldn't clean this down anyways if I was going to go that far and get all the flaked, rusted paint off of it. It's just, I don't really want to do that. And you know me, I'm kind of a purist, so. And either way, whether I restore that tractor or not, if I sell that Bollins, this is going to go with it, because that's just what's going to happen. Because I'm going to send it on home with it, because this will be the engine that goes in it. I'm hoping I can get this running and put it into that tractor, because what I want to do is get that tractor running, and I think I'm probably going to sell it because of the money that I have tied up into it, and then take the second one that came with it and scrap that, put it back together and scrap it, all the bits and everything, the original engine, put that all back together and just scrap it, now that I've found this. Unless I can get the starter generator to work on this, but I don't think I'm going to get that far into it. I might save it and put it off to the side for somebody who may want to see if there's even, because I think there's a mount right here where I could mount that, and I might just put it on the side for somebody to see if they ever want to do that, but I don't think I want to get in that depth into it, because then I gotta get that polarizer to solenoid to get a spot to set that up here, which probably wouldn't be too much, but the clearance is. And then I gotta swap this tank out probably, which I might have to do anyways. We'll see. It all depends. That may just have to happen, but I'm hoping not. I'm hoping it'll fit under the hood and be fine, because I would love to get that tractor going because of the money that I have tied up into it. I will be right back, YouTube folks. I'm going to get another wrench for the size of this, which I believe is 5/16 for that points and condenser. I'm not going to put the carburetor back on just yet. I want to check the points out. So I am going to work on the points and condenser on this one and see, but this video is getting pretty long, so I think we might stop it there. And in part 2, once I can see, well, off camera I'll probably see, because you don't really need to see that, if I can mount it in there. In part 2 video, which I might make after this, we'll see if this thing will run, but first let's get into the points before I close this out. So we've cleaned the carb so far. We're going to investigate the points, and now it's just a matter of seeing what our points look like and seeing if they're salvageable or if we have to get a new set of points, which is free to be determined. So we don't know what our condenser is in. Luckily these points and condenser things are fairly common. I think you can get some still at hardware, and I don't believe that it matters which ones you have. I think a Briggs & Stratton will work just as good in these as any. I think it's pretty much universal. They say it's universal for all model of Briggs, but I don't think it really matters. But if I do have to get a new points and condenser, I'll probably just get the correct ones anyways, just for the sake of it, because I'd rather get the right part than have the wrong part. And both me and you YouTube folks will see here in a minute if my hunch was right about, because this one's got breaker points, if my hunch was right about the swapping of the condenser, and that there's still possibly one sitting in there that is no good but didn't get taken out, or maybe it has, because I don't think that this condenser would be sitting out here like this normally, but again, like I said, I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I've worked on a Kohler like this, so truthfully stating, I don't know for sure. I mean, this is a first. This was a good score though, definitely a good score. I have a plan for this to go on that Bollens, but even if it's not powerful enough for that Bollens, I probably could still stick it on the old yellow snowblower and make that work there too. So Sorry YouTube folks, it's taking a little bit longer, but you know, these points covers sometimes the bolts when they sit out in the weather. I probably should have just grabbed the socket, would have been so much easier if I didn't think about it. And I was kind of just in a hurry. And I knew where there was a 5/16 wrench, sorry, because this is a 5/16 you will need for these 5/16, and usually if these have an oil dipper on them, most of the ones I've run into, it's 5/16 bolt, unless otherwise. And oftentimes either 7/16 or 3/8 on the housing for the recoil for any machines, so just keep that in mind. I've been working on these a lot, so I've kind of gotten familiar with them quite a bit. And yes, I was correct, these points are corroded. I will bring you down here and see it. Whoops, sorry. These points are corroded. You can see right there, that's pretty corroded. So we'll clean up the points, and I'll probably do that off camera, because it's just easier. And I will catch you in the next video, YouTube folks. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you would. You know, I don't always say it in a certain order, but, you know. And as always, if you dislike my video, most of you by now have seen all my videos and know the drill. And keep your heads up, stay strong, all that kind of jazz. Have an excellent time, whatever it is, wherever you are. And I will see you in part 2 of this. I will clean the points off camera, and we will get back to you in part 2, because this video is almost 50 minutes long, and I just want to end it there. Thank you so much, and as always, sunshine, unicorns, and rainbows.